Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Total War, The Last Roman, and History. I'm Marcus Aurelius, and this is my attempt to marry the exciting gameplay of the Total War series with actual history from the period. This is a sequel to my series Total War Attila, the Eastern Roman Empire and History, and that series followed the Eastern and the Western Roman Empires from the time of Emperor Diocletian in 284 AD through the death of the Emperor Justin in 527 AD. I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't already. I'm very proud of it. I don't believe there's anything like it in scope anywhere on YouTube. This series, however, will be much more focused. It will center upon the lifetime of two key players, the Emperor Justinian I and Flavius Belisarius. We will start with Belisarius and we'll discuss his early life and then his three military theaters, the war in the East versus Persia, which is left out of this game campaign, and then the war in North Africa versus the Vandals, and finally the war in Italy versus the Ostrogoths. And we can play through and witness those in addition to talking about them. After that, we will discuss Justinian, Theodora, his empress, Antonina, the wife of Belisarius, and other key Roman players of the period. Then we'll move on to other relevant factions, such as the Persians, Vandals, and Ostrogoths. Interspersed among all of that, we're going to talk about Roman society and culture during this period, changes in the makeup and fighting style of the Roman army, and any other topics that may come up. As I made clear in my previous series, I'm an enthusiast and amateur historian of the Eastern Roman, or more commonly known today, Byzantine empires. This is not intended to be a scholarly work, and none of this material is my own. It's all from other sources. So now actually would be a good time to go over those sources, which I have taken pictures of and will put up on the screen as I talk about them. Now, first off, our sources are going to be separated into two forms: primary sources and secondary sources. A primary source is a source that was written by an individual who was alive during the time period that we're discussing, while a secondary source was written by someone in modern times, or at least later than the times that we're discussing, based on reading other historical works. Our main primary source for this period is going to be the works of Procopius, who was the secretary of Belisarius. He traveled with Belisarius and was personal witness to many of the events that we'll be discussing. He's written a number of things, but his most popular works include the more neutral History of the Wars, which follow the exploits of Belisarius in the Persian, Vandal, and Ostrogothic wars. But then he also has his more scandalous and steamy tabloid book, The Secret History, which talks a lot of gossip about some of the leading political figures of the time. With regards to secondary sources, we're going to start with sources that are Belisarius specific, including Belisarius, the Last Roman General, by Ian Hughes, The Life of Belisarius by Lord Mahon, which was actually written in the 1800s, and is incredibly interesting because it contains a very, very time-specific and almost misogynistic tone sometimes. We're also going to take a look at a book called Justinian's Flea by William Rosen. Now, this book came as a real surprise to me because I thought it was going to focus simply on the plague that happened during the time Justinian was emperor, but it is so much more. In fact, I would recommend, if you're looking for a book to really sum up this time period and the players involved, this is the one to check out. The first half of the book just simply talks about Justinian, Belisarius, and there's information there on Justinian's advisors and the important people in the city that I haven't been able to find anywhere else. So it's a great book. And finally, though this isn't really a history book, we're going to be looking at Count Belisarius by Robert Graves. This is actually a historical fiction book, so we're not going to be using it necessarily for a source, but it's a good book to look at to get a more vivid picture of what was going on during this time. Next, we're going to look at some secondary sources that are simple general Byzantine Roman history. For example, Lost to the West by Lars Brownworth, The World of Late Antiquity by Peter Brown, The History of the Byzantine State by George Ostrogorsky, The Grand Strategy of the Byzantine Empire by Edward Litwack, The Byzantine Wars by John Haldon, The Fighting Emperors of Byzantium by John Carr, and A History of the Byzantine State and Society by Warren Treadgold. All of these are basic histories that cover other time periods besides just the one we're looking at, but they're packed with really good information and combined give us a very clear picture of what was going on during this period. Finally, we'll be looking at some army-specific illustrated guides. These are small books that have illustrations of what the particular Roman Byzantine soldiers look like during this period. There's Byzantine Armies 325 to 1453 AD by Dimitris Belazos and Christos Giannopoulos. And finally, there's Romano-Byzantine armies from the 4th to the 9th centuries by David Nicole and Angus McBride. So I won't necessarily always cite these books by name, but these are the books that I'm going to be using to compile the information that I'm going to be speaking about during this series. And occasionally I will cite individual quotes from these pieces, and if you have any questions about any of them, please let me know in the comments. One of the many things I enjoyed about the previous series was the participation of you, the viewer. A lot of my viewers know a lot about these people and events, and this isn't about just me vomiting information at you, but rather an opportunity to start a discussion with many viewpoints, which is really fun. One other thing I'd like to bring to this series is an increased focus on the human element. A lot of time we play these games and we're distanced from what's happening, the violence and the terror. We think coldly and clinically about the strategy and tactics, the ones and zeros, and I hope to be able to sometimes bring this back down to earth and discuss how our actions would conceivably affect the lives of real people living in this period, because that's kind of the point of history. The point of history is not just to read a list of things that happened in the past, but to understand what life was like for people in the past and to learn lessons from that, right? From a technical gameplay standpoint, we will be playing as the Roman expedition, and as happened historically, we will be remaining loyal to Justinian. I'm also going to be using the Radius mod. To be honest, I don't know a ton about it, but it does seem to make the game a bit more difficult, the battles longer, and the AI more cautious. The reason I'm using it is that it's required for this fantastic submod, which adds a ton of historical unit types based on the Notitia Dignitatum, a surviving historical document from the end of the 4th century. Yeah, that's a bit earlier than the period of this campaign, and no mod out there is truly 100% historically accurate, but I feel this one is a very good example and will make the series much more interesting and exciting, adding a lot of cool and not overpowered unit variety. So that's basically it. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, starting with the next episode, we will present Total War, The Last Roman, and History. I hope you enjoy it. Hope you learn a lot. I hope you participate in the comments. By all means, let me know what you think, and have a good one.